Hello leaders and future leaders. This is retired Sergeant First Class Beitz. In this video, we're gonna discuss how I almost died at infantry school, literally. Before we get into the video, if you would like the video, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Simply hitting that like button goes a long way with me and other content creators, so I greatly appreciate it. Now, in several of my videos where I'm talking about infantry school, I mentioned how it's grueling and difficult, but it's also fun, exciting, and unique. When I say infantry school, I'm referring to 11 Bravo OSUT training. For those that don't know, OSUT is one station unit training, or sometimes I refer to it as one stop unit training. Every day in infantry school is planned down to the minute. And even if there's a 30-minute block where there's nothing specifically scheduled, it's planned that way. And the drill sergeants are gonna use those 30 minutes for hip pocket training, for a smoke session, what have you. Now, this specific situation takes place about 3 or so weeks into infantry school. We head out to the field for an FTX, or a field training exercise. We're going out there to learn how to build foxholes, learn how to set up 360-degree perimeters, conduct foot patrols, learn noise and light discipline, etc. Even though we're in Georgia, it's really cold. And being from Southwest Florida, 65 degrees is cold to me, but we're talking about lower 30s, upper 20s. To make matters worse, it was extremely windy and rainy. An infantry saying that we have, it could be army-wide, but we say it in the infantry at least, if it ain't raining, we ain't training. And that's supposed to mean that no matter the weather, we're always gonna suck it up and drive on. We're supposed to be tough guys. I specifically remember the first couple hours of this FTX because I was having jaw pain from clenching my teeth from being so cold. And I remember thinking the next few days are gonna be rough. I second guessed my MOS choice, which happened several times at infantry school. I would think like, why didn't I join an admin job where I wasn't in this kind of weather or, training like this or in these kind of environments? But if you wanna be part of the most elite MOS in the Army, there's sacrifices that you're gonna have to make, period. Anyway, we trained from like 5 a.m. until midnight. Yes, you heard me right, 5 a.m. to midnight. When nightfall hits, the rain turns to snow and everything that was wet begins to freeze. Remember, when we got to the field, it was raining. So training from 5 a.m. until midnight, it rained the whole time, so we were soaked. We were wearing wet weather gear, but that is only gonna help so much. And either way, our boots were soaked, and when your feet are wet and it's cold, it just takes a toll on your body. It doesn't matter though. The drill sergeants don't feel bad for you, and rightfully so. Drill sergeants have seen thousands and thousands of other soldiers train in the same conditions and not complain, so they don't want to hear any whining from you. Your enemy doesn't feel bad for you either. If you're not training harder than your ops, you're slipping. And if you're slipping, that can be fatal. Let's just be real here. Around midnight, our drill sergeants tell us we have 4 or so hours to sleep. Then we'd get up and go right back to training. I can't even put into words how excited I was to get out of my wet uniform and my wet boots and get in my sleeping bag. I was literally like fantasizing about it throughout the day just because I was so cold for so long. So we're released to bunk down. And remember, we're infantrymen, so we're not going back to the barracks to sleep in a warm building on a bunk. We are sleeping on the wet, freezing cold dirt in the middle of the woods while it's snowing. My battle buddy Banks, who I mentioned in a lot of my videos, and I run over to our rucksacks. We start debating if we should build a hooch to protect ourselves from the weather or to just rely on our sleep systems. Now, our sleep systems have multiple layers, and you use those layers depending upon the weather. The outer layer is completely waterproof, and you're able to get inside of that and then zip it up 360 degrees to prevent rain from getting in, or snow, or rodents, things like that. Most of the time, what we would do is just put down our outer layer and then get our internal layers, put them inside the outer layer, and then basically throw that on the dirt and then just lay there on the dirt. If we're lucky, we might find, some soft brush that we can throw under our outer layer, put the outer layer on the brush, then jump inside of our sleeping bag with the inner layers that are warm and zip ourselves up, and that's how we sleep. And that's what we decided to do that night, just because we only had 4 hours to sleep, so we didn't want to waste any time putting up a hooch. Side note, Hooches are no longer a thing. Infantrymen are now equipped with these high-speed tents, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm jealous. I wish we would have had those back in the day. I'll show you a picture here. They sleep one person and they pack up really tight. They compress really well, so you can put those in your rucksack and, you know, bring them out to the field with you. I grab my sleeping bag and it's covered in ice because of the weather. I realized that I forgot to put it in a wet weather bag. So with it raining all day, it got soaked, and then because of the freeze, it turned it into basically a block of ice. I couldn't even open my sleeping bag. Now I start to worry because I know I can't survive the night without a sleeping bag, but I also know if I tell the drill sergeants that I didn't put my sleeping bag in a wet weather bag, then I might not be able to survive the smoke session that they put me through. Banks realizes that I'm stressing and he asks me what's up. I tell him, look bro, I'm in trouble. My sleeping bag is frozen shut. He ends up telling me I can share his sleeping bag with him because that's what battle buddies do. Now that might sound funny to a civilian, you know, two infantrymen sharing a sleeping bag, but we're training to go to war together and possibly die together. So sleeping in a sleeping bag together, it ain't shit. We get our little 4 hours of sleep and start conducting training the next day. The weather stays windy, rainy, and cold, but you know, we strive on. As the day progressed, I started to feel sick. I'm not sure how it is at other MOS schools, but in infantry school, you suck it up unless it's an emergency. As silly as it sounds, we would clown on anybody that went to sick call. Sick call is where you go to see a doctor if you are injured or sick. You may have heard the term sick call ranger. It's a phrase used by lower enlisted soldiers who are referring to somebody that goes to sick call frequently. Anyway, after another full day and full night of training, everyone is exhausted. I feel terrible, I have a fever, I'm very weak, and I feel sick to my stomach. Day 3, I wake up and I don't even feel human. I feel extremely sick and delusional. Drill sergeants called in the morning for anyone that needed to go to sick call, but I decided not to go and just to suck it up. About an hour after they called for sick call, my drill sergeant came up to me and was like, Beitz, what's going on with you? You're white as a ghost. I said, well, drill sergeant, you know, I'm not feeling very well. He said, we called for sick call. Why didn't you go? I said, drill sergeant, I just didn't want to get looked down on. So drill sergeant just walks away from me. A few minutes later, he comes back. He's got keys in his hands. He's like, Beitz, follow me. I'm driving you to sick call. So he could tell just by my appearance and from knowing me for, you know, 3 weeks at this point, that something was truly wrong with me. I get to sick call, they take my vitals, my blood pressure's high, I have a temperature of 103, so they take me to the infirmary. When I get to the infirmary, they give me ibuprofen and water, and it's kind of a joke because in the military, like no matter what happens, what kind of injury you have, you could be sick, you could have stubbed your toe, you could have broken a nail, they're gonna give you ibuprofen and water every single time. About an hour after I got to the infirmary, a nurse comes and takes my vitals again. At this point, my temperature is over 104, so she tells me that they gotta take me to the emergency room immediately. At the emergency room, I quickly get taken back to a room and I am told to get undressed and get in this bathtub. Now, I thought the nurse was joking with me, so I was like, ma'am, with all due respect, I'm too sick for jokes. She said, I'm not joking, take off your clothes and get in that bathtub. I was like, oh. So I get in this bathtub, they've got freezing cold water running in it, and then another nurse is coming in with ice and they're just throwing ice in the tub. So they basically gave me an ice bath. Of course, the reason was because my core temperature was so high that they were trying to get my core temperature down. I'm telling you guys, I was so sick that I actually thought I was dying. It felt like my organs were shutting down. It felt like I had brain damage. I couldn't comprehend things. I couldn't see straight. I was lethargic. It's like I feel like I know what dying's like now because of that situation. They get me into a bed and they hook up an IV. Then they hand me a menu. Okay, so in the military, you eat, especially at basic training, you eat what you're provided. You don't have options, okay? So this menu that they give me has hamburgers, chicken nuggets, pizza, you know, anything you can think of. They had a great menu, and I'm looking at the menu like, nothing sounds good. Like, I don't feel like I can eat anything, but I get some soup because I know that my body needs some type of nourishment. After my first night in the hospital, my drill sergeant shows up early in the morning to get an update on my health. The nurse tells him that I have been diagnosed with pneumonia and I'm gonna need some time in the hospital. Of course, he tells the nurse that that's not an option, and the following day I needed to be back at training or I was going to miss training that was vital to successfully completing OSUT training. If I didn't complete that, then I would be recycled. This was a terrible position to be in, and it was upsetting. I'm over here dying, and my drill sergeant's talking about, well, if I don't come back to training the next day, then I'm gonna be recycled. And I had already been there for 3 weeks, and I did not want to get recycled. It's like something that you just don't want to happen while you're at, basic training, advanced training, OSUT, regardless. You don't want to be recycled. You don't want to go through any of the process that you've already been through again. The next day comes and drill sergeant comes to check on me. I do feel a little bit better, but I don't really feel like I could even stand up because my body felt so weak. The nurse tells my drill sergeant that I'm not physically in a position where they can release me from the hospital. Drill sergeant doesn't really say anything to me, he just leaves. A couple hours later, he comes back with my commander. My commander basically demands my release. I remember signing some kind of form that stated I understand that I am leaving the hospital against the doctor's orders. And I basically had to do it. I felt pressured to do it, and I didn't want to be recycled. It was just a lose-lose situation. I believe my commander even had to sign something, like I signed. My commander leaves, and my drill sergeant tells me that I'm gonna ride with him directly to the firing range so that I can qualify with my weapon. The walk from my hospital room to drill sergeant's truck was agonizing. I had no strength, I had no energy, and I couldn't even see straight. We get to the firing range, and I can barely see the targets. Matter of fact, I couldn't even see the 300-meter target. However, against all odds, I managed to qualify with my M16. After I qualified with my weapon, my commander authorized me the rest of the day to be on bed rest. So my drill sergeant took me back to the barracks where I was able to sleep, and I slept for 15 hours straight. For the next week or so, I was still sick, but I just pushed through it. And that was probably the most unhealthy thing that I've ever done in my life, being that sick, but just training. I know I did gain respect from my commander and my drill sergeants for, driving on, but either way, it was just brutal. That's one thing about OSUT or basic training is there's just certain things that you cannot miss, especially ranges, or you're gonna get recycled. Ranges are scheduled for specific units on specific dates. So if you missed a range, the Army's not going to just open up a range so that you can go qualify because you were sick. It just doesn't work that way. So that was how I almost died at infantry school. It's great to be hardcore, but there's a point where trying to be hardcore is just stupid. Train smarter, not harder. If you have any questions about the military, the Army, infantry, leave a comment below. Be tactful in everything that you do. Stay alert. Stay alive.